This is Stacy McKibben with the Master Communicator podcast, where CEOs, senior leaders, and C-suite executives share their advice. It's 6 questions in 9 minutes because the best leaders know how to share their ideas concisely and quickly. Let's jump right in. Question number 1. In a few sentences, tell me who you are and what you do.
I am a chief behavioral officer and advising strategic change scientist, which is a lot of words. And so that means I do science, behavioral science and behavioral economics in particular, in any employee or consumer user related contexts. And it's all for attempting and achieving driving change and creating meaning in human-centric brands and workplace cultures. So that would be my main business self. And then my main academic and research self is I'm a lecturer, taught at various universities over the last decade, a PhD from the University of Toronto, and I've taught courses like social psychology, emotions and marketing, history and philosophy of science and psychology. And then I'd say I'm also a writer self, so I'm an author. I've written for Atlantic, Business Insider, Forbes, Inc. And finally, if I may, I'd say I'm a podcast host as well. So I'm the host of It's All Just a Bunch of BS, where I bring on the best and foremost experts in the behavioral science and behavioral design space.
That's amazing. Well, I'm super excited to get your insights today on, communication and leading people through the mind of a behavioral scientist. This will be very exciting for our audience today. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the best thing about leading people, would you say?
I'd say the best thing is actually learning from people, and being comfortable that you don't have all the answers and that you actually have to learn from those individuals in the organization and on your team. And that, I, as the leader, don't know how to do it or don't know how to do it best. And that there's plenty of people who work for me or who work alongside me who are much better. I think the old school way of thinking and the old school style of leadership was the rule all. And the sort of didactic approach, and that's no longer the case. I think it's a dying breed of leadership today, and today's leaders are much more vulnerable, much more open, much more compassionate, and they have this really high degree of socio-emotional intelligence. So I think the best thing about being a leader is just being human and learning and letting your people know that you are here to learn and here to support.
My gosh, that proverbial, you mean you put your pants on one leg at a time too, right? That whole, we're all human, we all do the same things, and, let's just come together in that way. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that leads me to question number 3, which you might get a kick out of personally, which is sometimes I'll hear from other leaders, business would be great if it weren't for that pesky people part. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? From a behavioral scientist perspective.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, those people are so wrong. That's one of the worst things I've ever heard. If there's people still saying that, none of your listeners or your people who are watching, but business is people. It's synonymous. Like the people. I mean, it's just such a technical truth, and it's such a fact. So business is people, and as I say in a lot of the conversations I have with partners and clients and different organizations, is that I say all business is behavioral. So at every point in the process, there's going to be a person or people, a person that thinks, feels, acts, reacts, behaves, either rationally or irrationally. And I think we get caught up often a lot of the times in sort of the real business and the real commercializing of our products and services. We get caught up in the logistics and the rushing and the rushing around and hurrying around to deliver and to ship products, that we often forget to do business at its most fundamental level is to engage with people. And I think once we begin to understand that, we will be better leaders, we will build better organizations. And sort of going back to the previous answer and the previous question, I think for a long time, leaders and organizations got away with sort of that thinking, but no longer. There's going to be a time, and it's already happening, and it's only going to continue to accelerate in this direction, where if you don't recognize that, then if you don't take the time to invest in your people and to recognize that everything comes down to a human behavior, then you're not optimizing for your business and you're going to lose out. That's just the fact. And in market competition, forget it. You're a dying breed.
So you're kind of suggesting that folks should look at it as their competitive advantage as opposed to, this thing that holds back.
Absolutely. And on paper, it might seem that it's the furthest thing from a competitive advantage because it takes time, it takes resources, it takes energy. I mean, I'll just take one example. If you recognize that one of your people is struggling and you have to have a really tough conversation, and you have to have that difficult conversation that no one really likes to have, whether you're the leader or the person on the other side of it. Taking that time should be seen as an investment. You're investing in that conversation, you're investing in the emotional, you're investing in the dynamics in the relationship with that person. And you're going to see the return on that if you actually do it. And that will come in the form of, in the dividends of that individual, that employee's productivity, their wellness, their well-being, how they collaborate with others, and all the good things that we want in an organization or within a team.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, if I had a group of leaders sitting here in front of you right now, what piece of advice about communication would you give to them?
I could go on for 90 minutes, so let me just choose one, which maybe you've heard before, maybe you haven't, but I would say bring humor to the table. You don't have to be a stand-up comic. You don't have to have the sharpest and the wittiest sense of humor, but in your own way, make people smile, grin, or laugh. And anytime I give a presentation, a talk, a keynote, or even just have a meeting with a person or a group of people, my main goal, a number of main goals, but often my main goal across all those is to make people laugh. And it doesn't have to be related to what's going on, just make people feel good. And often what works for me and isn't going to work for everyone is self-deprecation. So like just a light little ribbing of yourself and a jab at yourself will get, going back to the point of leaders being compassionate and vulnerable and human. If somebody sees that, whether it's in a keynote to an audience or whether it's your one-on-one with some of your direct reports, they will say, he or she actually does that. I think that's really cool. So that's my advice.
Love it. All right. So who other successful business leaders like yourself, Mr. Hobson, should be on the podcast, right? So, who else should our audience be paying attention to?
So I'll limit it to 3 because, threes always work so well in our business. I'll say first, Christine Yip. And Christine and I met back in my first consulting gig outside of academia. And there was a lot of horrible people in that organization, and she was just one of the good ones. And she and I still keep in close contact, and we collaborate on projects and work together with different client engagements. So Christine is a local person here in Toronto, Canada. She's the managing director of the organization called Organizations for Impact. And it's all meant to partner with her clients and organizations who are trying to deliver high social impact through things like, corporate social responsibility. So that's first. The second, it would be Samuel Salser, he's a Swede, and he's a behavioral UX designer. And he is doing the amazing work of bringing the design world and user experience and fusing that with my world of behavioral science. And those two things married together just deliver such tremendous value, often for product designers. It's a really cool thing to watch, and for him to work his magic in particular. And then third is a recent contact named Zvi Band. Zvi is an investor and an entrepreneur in the SaaS and the CRM space. And he's built successful companies in that world and in that market. And now his recent focus is driving the point about bringing meaningful connection in work and in organizations, and how we actually need to recreate meaning and social connection that has actually been lost to a great extent in our modern futuristic world. So those are the 3 I'd say: Zvi, Christine, and Samuel.
Thank you. I'll definitely go hunt them down and make sure that they get on the show.
Yes.
All right, magic question number 6. In less than 1 minute, please tell us, who has influenced you? Who's been your favorite boss or teacher?
Say my favorite teacher was the introductory psych professor in my first year of undergraduate, when I was actually enrolled in a pre-med. And he was such an inspiring mentor and teacher and presenter that I decided I would switch out of medicine and do psychology as a study, and then as a profession, as now the behavioral science that I am. And Dick Day was this interesting character who wore sandals and socks in the summer, and is still teaching at my alma mater where I did my undergrad. And he's been doing that for, I think, 35 years. And I can just imagine the number of lives and students he's touched, like my own, who it was because of him that I now do what I do as an adult. And I reached out to him a couple years ago to let him know that. And he was very gracious and very happy to hear that he had such a positive impact. And no doubt he's had that impact on probably hundreds, if not thousands of other people like myself.
It's amazing when you can actually go back and let somebody know and, tell them what a big part of your life they were,
It was such a fun email to write. It was one of my favorite emails I think I've ever drafted.
That's super cool. Well, Nick, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I've really appreciated all of your insights. I'm curious if somebody wanted to reach out and introduce themselves or learn more about you, how might they go about that?
They can find me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Nick Hobson on LinkedIn. It can be Nick Hobson PhD, maybe, I don't know. But Nick Hobson on LinkedIn, you can find me there. Or my Gmail, they can always email me at nhbehaviorist@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And I'll be sure to put it down in the description below if everybody knows they can click on that to find you. So that would be great. And I do hope you'll come back and join us in the fall. We're going to do another 6 questions and have another round of interviews. So we'd certainly love to have you back as a guest.
Yeah, happy to come back on anytime.
Thank you so much. And until then, this is Stacey McKibben with the Master Communicator podcast. For more ideas and insights, please do go check us out at www.concilioteam.com. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.